Alright, chapter 1.4 is on complex numbers. So we're going to work some problems from chapter 1 review that can be found in your book on page 202. These problems are on page 204 under the section 1.4. So we're going to work on number 48, 49, 51, and 53. So complex numbers can be treated like any other numbers. You know, when I have for a complex number, I have a real part, which I can call A, plus an imaginary part, which is BI. The I is the imaginary part. Remember, I is the same as saying the square root of -1. So here's a complex number. So when I'm adding and subtracting complex numbers, I put like terms together. You put the real part together, and then you put the imaginary part together. In essence, you can think of I, this variable I, one second. You can think of I as X or Y or Z, whatever you want to think about. So this can be thought of as A plus BX. And when I'm adding complex numbers together, I put the like terms together. So let's look at number 48. So first of all, I see I have 8 minus 3i in parentheses minus the quantity 17 minus 7i. So first I need to eliminate these parentheses. Well, what's on the outside of this parentheses? A positive 1. What's on the outside of this one? A negative 1. So this positive 1, I can just ignore these parentheses and drop off because nothing's going to change. When I distribute this 1 inside, I'm still going to be left with 8 minus 3i. Whereas when I distribute the negative 1 inside, I'll end up with negative 17 plus 7i. It's negative 1 times 17, and then it's negative 1 times negative 7i. Awesome. So now let's put our like terms together. Well, I have 8, and I have a minus 17. If I put those together, I end up with a negative 9. So that's negative 9. That's the real part. And then I have negative 3i plus 7i. If I put those together, I end up with a positive 4i. So the real part is negative 9, and the imaginary part is the 4i. Good. Let's go over to 49. So here we're working with complex numbers still, but now we need to multiply them. And you notice that I have a 4i on the outside of this parentheses, which means I have to distribute it inside. So I'm going to have 4i times 3i, which is going to give me 12i squared. Because remember, it's I times I, which is I squared, minus 4i times 2, which is 8i. So minus 8i. Now, if I is equal to the square root of negative 1, what is I squared equal to? Well, it's equal to the square root of negative 1 squared, which is negative 1. So this turns into 12 times negative 1 minus 8i. Instead of writing the I squared, now you're writing the negative 1. And let's clean it up. 12 times negative 1 is negative 12 minus 8i. Good. 51. So let's think about this. What does this square mean? If I say what is 4 squared, you would say it's 16. But what does the square really mean? It means 4 times 4. Or something squared is that something multiplied by itself 2 times. So when I look at this and I see the quantity 3 minus 4i squared, I see the quantity 3 minus 4i squared. Well, what I need to do is 3 minus 4i times 3 minus 4i. That's what square means. It means take this and multiply by itself again. So now I see I have this multiplication, which means I need to either FOIL or distribute over the subtraction signs. So I'm going to take, let's change my color. Blue. So I'm going to end up with 3 times 3 which is 9. And then I have 3 times the negative 4i, which is minus 12i. And then I have a negative 4i times 3, which is still minus 12i. And then I have a negative 4i times a negative 4i, which is positive 16i squared. Let's put our like terms together. So we have 9 minus 24i, because I have negative 12i here and I have a negative 12i there, plus 16, but instead of writing the I squared, that's a negative 1. Good, so now we have 9 minus 24i minus 16. And I still have my like terms. 9 and negative 16 are like terms. So that's a negative 7 minus 24i. And that one's done. All right, number 53. Here I have a complex number, and I'm dividing. So I have to do something very different from when I was subtracting and adding complex numbers and multiplying complex numbers. Here I'm dividing. And when you're dividing complex numbers, your goal is to not have, how should we say it? Not have an imaginary, let's take that back. 1 second. How about this? Your goal is not to have an I at all in your denominator. You do not want an I in your denominator. So in order to get I out of the denominator, we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate. Let's see if I can spell this right. Conjugate of 5 plus I. And the conjugate is just still 5 in the I, but the only thing that's different is that plus sign. So the conjugate of 5 plus I is 5 minus I. So you're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of 5 plus I, which is 5 minus I. I need to clean this up a little bit or I'm going to run out of room. So 1 second. 5 minus I. So you can multiply top and bottom by 5 minus I. And you do the top and you do the bottom, because what you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. It's all about being fair. So now let's multiply. And when we multiply fractions, we multiply numerator by numerator, which is 6 times 5 minus I. Divide by, well, 5 plus I times 5 minus I. 5 plus I times 5 minus I. Okay, so let's see if we can further clean this up. Well, the top, I'm going to distribute this 6, and I'm going to end up with 30 minus 6i. Divide by, well, the bottom is just like number 51. I have to FOIL or distribute over the addition and subtraction signs. So I'm going to have a 5 times 5, which is 25. 5 times negative I, which is negative 5i. I times 5, which is plus 5i. And then I times negative I, which is minus I squared. If we're lucky, we won't run out of room. We'll see. So the top is still 30 minus 6i. Now, your denominator, what happens here? Well, I have a negative 5i. It cancels with positive 5i. This I squared is really negative 1. So that's like saying minus a negative 1. So let's see what we have here. 25 minus negative 1 is going to be positive 26. And then last thing we're going to do is we're going to separate this into a real part, the real part, and the imaginary part. So 30 divided by 26 is just 15 over 13, minus 6 divided by 26 is going to be 3 over 13, and don't forget the I is there.